In this video, I'm covering the game between Alireza Firouzja and Alexandr Predke from round 3. The opening was Rui Lopez, and they played for this old variation, I think, Mislo variation. And in general, Rui Lopez is a closed opening, so there's lots of maneuvering involved. So any loss of tempo is not as important as in the opened position. Now white and black start to regroup their pieces to make them better, to put them on better squares. Now bishop f8. Black wants to fianchetto his bishop, and because on e7 it doesn't have any future. So first h6. Now the knight goes back to d7 because he wants to make his bishop better, and also black might want to go to b6 and c4 at some point. Because of that, preemptively he plays b3, knight b7, bishop b2, and also he wants to put some pressure on the e5 pawn at some point by putting the bishop on b2. Rook b8, rook b1, and now g6. Like I said, he fianchettos the bishop. Bishop d3, and by bishop d3 also he wants to put his bishop on this diagonal, and maybe to put pressure on these advanced pawns on the queen side. Black is solidifying his pawn structure on the queen side by c6, queen c2, and now knight h5. He's hinting towards knight f4, but also he wants to go back to g7 and to e6 to put pressure on the d4 pawn. Bishop f1 and knight g7 back. And now Firouzja takes on d5. Now the position gets more open. D, and now c4. Now he wants to open up his bishop and also to gain some space on the queen side and in the center. Rook c8, rook bd1, and now Predke played queen e7. If he tried something like f6 here, to get his knight to e6, that would weaken the g6 pawn. So he wanted to defend by different move order. f6 would just make black's pieces even more passive because the knight cannot go back to f6, and g6 is mainly very weak. So he tries queen e7, but now Firouzja plays a nice move, c5. And now if black doesn't answer, if he plays something like f6 here, then white is going to play b4 and start putting pressure on black really easily by knight b3, knight a5, doubling the rooks on the d file, and I think that this passive defense is not something that anyone wants. And if he takes with the queen on c5, now white would have a nice move, knight c4. And in case he takes, white takes the knight and he will capture on c4 on the next move. But if he plays rook c7 here, then after b4 and queen e7, we would have something similar like in the game. White would capture on e5, and after this trade, rook d7 maybe, takes. Still, black is very passive because of this knight on g7, which is weirdly placed, and also black has to push c5 at some point to make his bishop good again, but it doesn't seem it's so easy to do so. Instead, he took on c5 here with the knight, and now white took on e5, knight d7 back. And now again, the same motive we saw before, knight dc4. And if you take this, the knight on c4, then rook takes d7. And black loses the bishop. So black just took on e5, knight e5, and now he tries to exchange some pieces to get a breathing space. And now white plays queen c3. Black wanted to stabilize with knight e6, bishop g7, and to somehow claim that his position is not so bad after all. But after queen c3, now knight e6 is not possible because of simple knight g6. Knight c6 is even better because knight g6, he would have space for his king after queen h8. So here take on c6, and then black loses the queen because bishop g7 doesn't do anything because of the check on e7, and if you don't do it, then you get checkmated on h8. So queen c3 has this prophylactic thinking, like don't allow black to get an e6 with his knight and play bishop g7. Keep him like that, and let's see how it works out. And now black plays h5, and this move is played against knight g4 and getting to f6 and also attacking the h6 pawn. So he tries this, and now white exchanges, plays rook e3, trying to put pressure maybe on the f7 pawn, and also to compete for the d file, because d1 was not defended, so he didn't want to lose time on a move like queen c2 because it's getting out of this diagonal, so it allows knight e6, rook c7, and now rook d3. Maybe it was better to play b4 to fix these pawns on the queen side. And in case of c5, which would be a logical move to play, liberating break, because if you don't play it right now, white would have knight d3, knight c5, completely fix those pawns, and it wouldn't promise much of a fight from black. So c5 would be logical, and after takes, if black takes with the bishop, then this nice move is going to solve all the problems. Knight d7, and if he goes back, knight f6, king h8, and now rook d3. And if queen c8 here, queen e5, targeting g5 and h6. And if black plays rook c5 to stop this, just queen f4. And black is now provoked to play g5, but after a calm queen e3, now the h5 pawn is weakened, and also the whole king side of blacks is completely demolished. Pawns are advanced, and the king is more exposed now. And also, I want to mention, after b4, c5, if he takes with the rook, then just queen b3. And he targets f7 and g6 pawns. And even if you defend f7 by some move like queen c7, the g6 pawn is going to hang. And the whole position collapses pretty soon. Instead, Firouzja played rook d3, and after queen e7, queen d2. Trying to go for knight d7 and knight f6, the same idea as we saw a move before. But now white defends nicely. He plays bishop c8 here. Firouzja plays f4, and now c5. He tries maybe to create a passed pawn, and also to free his rook on c7. Rook f3, knight e6, and now black is slowly getting his counterplay. Knight goes to e6, bishop might go to g7, and his pieces are more harmonious now. It's not knight on g7, which is a very, very bad piece. Now a4. He's trying to break up the pawns on the queen side, and also if black takes on a4, to have bishop c4 in some moment, and combine it with f5, he might have something really nice. Knight d4 is played. Black is hoping that his bishop pair is going to be enough to compensate the loss of a pawn. And he was right, because after takes, bishop b5, now black is exchanging queens after queen b4, and the material is reduced, very reduced, and the bishop pair should be enough to compensate that. Takes, and now bishop c4. The threat is knight g6, so king g7 is played. And now rook f2. And rook a7. Knight c6, and black has to give a check to save the bishop pair. And now rook f1, the exchanges are forced, and now bishop d2. Black is even further liquidating material with bishop d2, because g3 is not possible due to bishop h3. So white just develops his king e2, bishop f4, and now king d3. White has a b pawn, but black also has a good blocking piece, which is this bishop on f4. And bishop d7 is played, knight d4, and now g5. And now black's plan is like this. I will block the b pawn and try to liquidate pawns, or just get closer to the pawns on the king side. And even if I have to give up one of the bishops, I will attack the pawns on the king side and make a draw. King c3, bishop e5, and now bishop e2. He tries to provoke h4, which would mean that his light bishop is going to save all the pawns on the king side. g4 takes, and now king c4. King gets closer, but king goes to d5 now. And now black has to be careful not to get into some bishop ending with opposite colors, because in this case it's not going to save him. The king is cutting off his opponent's king, and also g4 pawn is lost. So bishop c8 is played, b4 now, bishop b7. This is a mistake. He should have kept the bishop on this diagonal with bishop c7, and Firouzja would have some issues with realizing this disadvantage. Bishop b7 is bad because after knight c6, black is forced to push g3 if he doesn't want to lose the pawn. And now it's easier for white's bishop on e2 to defend those pawns with bishop f3. And white can focus on pushing his b pawn and eventually taking one of the bishops. Now Firouzja plays b5, bishop c7 to stop b6, but now king c5, and after king g5, e5 is played to limit the bishop on c7, king f4, and now bishop f3. A very nice move, headed towards, headed against bishop e5, because now knight e5 would just win the bishop, and that's over, because the b pawn is just too fast, and black tries king e3, but now after b6, bishop b8, last try from Predke, but now white can take on b8, and after bishop f3, white makes a bridge with knight c6, and after bishop g2, b7, and now unfortunately there is this skewer. Even if black promotes, he's not going to be able to save his queen, because queen b2 happens, and if black promotes, queen d4. And if something else happens, like bishop f3 or queen f3, then simply queen d4 wins the game, because next he's going to block it with his queen. That was it. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day. Bye.